Everybody, welcome to the, suppose this is the second edition of this year's DevSecOps Live. DevSecOps Live brought to you by Practical DevSecOps. My name is Myron. I am a trainer slash consultant at Practical DevSecOps, and you would have seen me host and present at some of these DevSecOps Live events. A little bit about Practical DevSecOps. If you haven't heard about it, go check us out at www.practicaldevsecops.com. The intention of DevSecOps Live is to bring in industry experts, practitioners, and fellow consultants to come on stage and share their experiences. We have done some great talks on threat modeling, privacy modeling, automation, DevSecOps, and plenty of other topics, even scaling your security champions program and so on. And coming up now is from reactive to effective application security, and building an application security program that works. You will only be able to relate to this if you've been in application security and if you have tried to consult teams or even educate them about application security. The amount of reluctance that you might face, boy. Well, that's what Chris Lindsey is going to talk about. I'll make a very short introduction. Chris Lindsey is an application security evangelist at mend.io, and I will let Chris take over the stage, introduce himself as well. I've kept it intentionally brief. Chris, go ahead, introduce yourself, and for all the attendees that we have today. Good luck.
Yes, thank you for the invite. Guys, I appreciate being here. My name is Chris Lindsey. My background, to kind of help fill in, because this is a topic that I'm very passionate about. My history, I wrote software for 35 years. And of the 35 years, the vast majority of it was in healthcare. And in some cases, it was writing software that if you mess up, somebody could actually die. So security is absolutely paramount. I went on to run a security program for a very large enterprise. And during that time, I built it from the ground up. And, it was one of those things where it was a learning experience. It was very effective and it worked very well. It leaned heavily on my development experience. So today's talk, from reactive to effective, is going to be actually talking about from two different angles. It's going to talk about from a developer angle and also from a security practitioner angle. So you're going to actually get both sides. And then I kind of bring it together on how you can do things. So let's talk about the agenda. So we're going to talk about we're going to start with reactive. Then we're going to talk about proactive. We're going to talk about your developer experience, because if you don't have a good developer experience, your program's just going to fall apart. We're going to talk about holistic view, what success looks like. And then if we have time, we'll do questions and answers. If we don't have enough time for Q&A, just drop your stuff in chat. We'll send it in and we'll take a look at it. So if you choose to not decide, you still have made a choice in your PERT. I always love starting off with a quote, and, with security, if you choose to not do anything, you've still made a choice, and that could be good or bad. So let's kick off here. So in 2023, 71% of the enterprises admitted their AppSec programs were reactive, playing catch up with vulnerability alerts. That's a survey from 2023 with 326 participants for very large enterprises. So let's talk about this. The grass is not greener on the other side of the fence. So stop acting like that. That is just something that it annoys me, because everybody's like, oh, we're great and we're good. No, there's actually a lot of things that you need to look. So let's talk about the telltale signs of what a reactive mode looks like. We're going to talk about the value of preventative best practices. We're going to talk about how to build security actions into developer experience, make it better for the developers. We're going to talk about your view of your entire application security program, how that looks, how to know, how to prioritize, how to put it all together, because without the prioritization, you're just kind of stuck. We're going to talk about low-hanging fruit and things that you can do to make your lives better. And then we're going to also talk about how to arm your security team with instant control at scale. So just because you're running well doesn't mean you're going to continue to run well. So how do you build for scale? So let's start off with a reactive state. All right. So 71%, as I just said, is not a good number. And context makes it even worse when you start considering the following. Nearly 70% of all organizations have directly encountered at least one serious incident from a software vulnerability over the last 12 months. Really, that number is higher. Even though I say nearly 70% and I say at least one, actually, when you look at what you consider a security incident, these are high critical security incidents. But really, on a day-to-day basis, you have a lot more going on. Some you know about, some you simply don't know about. And so you're really kind of in a reactive state. You have a lot data breaches, right? 78% increase from 2022. We were just announced, I think it's like 2.7, 2.8 billion social security numbers, names, addresses, and other sensitive information was just released in clear text. Just this week, it was announced. And when you look at data breaches, right, what's the root cause, of your data breach? APIs that are not doing, the proper multi-tenancy, or role-based access, or you're not doing multi-factor. I mean, there's a lot that plays into it. And so when you have data breaches, the thing you're doing is you're just really just playing catch up. You're fighting to, just get each day to go. And the problem is when you have things like the data breach, you're just fighting fires, right? So you're stuck, right? Attacks have made application security a board level priority for 85%. A lot of the executives are now starting to ask the questions. What are we doing for security? What are we doing in the application security arena? What are we doing for overall security? Are we going to get sued? Are we going to have an adverse event happen to us? So now you're starting to get a lot more visibility with boards. 20 years ago, who cared? Nobody talked about security 20 years ago the way that we talk about it today. So it is a growing area and an area that has a lot more eyes on it in these days. Reactive state also looks like this. 52% of the companies say they can effectively remediate a critical vulnerability. Let me ask you guys this question. Are you one of those 52% of the companies? And what I mean by that is, think about this. If you have a dependency or an issue that has been identified, can you quickly pivot? Can you quickly make those changes, right? Can you do something about this find? And 52% of the companies say they can't. And when you start really looking at what that means, that's a really bad spot. And that's beyond just security debt, your tech debt, and your other things really lean heavily into that. And so there's so much more to it. 44% of practitioners agree with that statement. So it's not just me saying, hey, this is a problem. Even the practitioners are saying, we have a problem and something needs to be done. With a reactive state, you're constantly putting out application security fires, right? So when you're actually in a reactive state, which so many companies are, your security team, they come in, they sit down, they grab their coffee, like here, and they open up their email and they have all the stuff that they have to tend to. They have phone calls, meetings. It's just, and it's just one email after another. We had this, we had that, we have this, we have that. The knock is calling. And, in the evenings, I leave, I go home, I'm trying to spend time with my family, my friends, go out for dinner, have dinner, and the phone's ringing. Hey, we have, it's a security team, something's going on. And so the reactive state is the whole place is just burning down. And you're just, you're just stuck in Groundhog Day where you're not making any progress. And as you're doing this, your tech debt incurs interest. And what I mean by that is those quick decisions your development team made to cut the corners to get something out quicker are going to come back and bite them. And the reason why I say it incurs interest is because sometimes those changes take a lot more effort to fix later once it gets to production than it does just to do it right the first time. And so the bill will will come due at some point. So let's talk about the developer teams, right? What leads AppSec programs to be stuck in reactive mode? So you're neglecting your dependency updates. So this is low-hanging fruit. Your dependency updates are, and this is how it used to be. I needed something like a file upload or something for logging. Why would I go rewrite something that's already there? So I go find a dependency or a library, I grab it, I try it out, it works. It's exactly everything I need. So I plug it in, I go through QA, it makes it to production, it's running. Why would I change it? And honestly, I was there too. I ran, when I was running my development teams, why would we go back and upgrade? It was working. We never thought about it most of the time from a security standpoint. And so you set it, forget it, right? And then you start getting security involved and you start bringing in tools, and then you start going in with alert fatigue. So now what's happening is you have a security team that has got these great tools that say, hey, look, we have our SAST findings, our DAST findings, our IAST findings, our pen test findings, our SCA findings. I mean, you have findings from all these tools. And what happens is you have a security team that just doesn't have a developer on it. So what happens is you just throw the stuff over the wall. The security team doesn't know any better. So they're going to throw it over to the developers. When the developers get it, they're going to look at you going, hey, this is a false positive, or this doesn't matter. The context of what you're sending me is irrelevant. And at some point, your developer teams are going to have alert fatigue and say, you know what, we don't want anymore. We don't care. You guys are nuts. You're sending this stuff over. You're not looking at the information, and it's a problem for us. So 88% of CISOs agree that alert fatigue is causing developers not to remediate. And I can tell you from working with so many companies and so many teams, this is absolutely true. All right, that's your developer side. Let's talk about your security side, because again, you still have the same problems going on. Fragmentation of data, functionality, and processes, right? 65% of the security infrastructure impedes the response effectiveness. I have a find. Great. Where is it? What tool? What application? You have all the stuff scattered. It's like an a la carte, which is not a bad thing if you have the best of the breed tools and you've got it all worked out and you've got it all set properly. But most security teams don't. Most security teams have random tools, open source tools, things that they're just running and grabbing, and you have all this disparate stuff feeding into what? You know, you got to log in, and this is part of that reactive, right? So you go in, you open up all the logs. Did anything bad happen? And from a security team, what's going on? And you're spending hours of your day just trying to get a pulse of, are we okay? And again, that's just a lot of work. And you don't have the ability to reach 100% coverage on your application. So guess what? We've got 15,000 applications running within our environment, and we've got 10 covered. What about the rest? So how do you focus on scale? You don't have visibility into what matters. And so it's hard to prioritize when you don't have the entire picture. 88% of CISOs say developers aren't remediating. 89% of code bases contained open source code that was more than 4 years. I will tell you 100% that is accurate. And the reason why is because when I've been at conferences, I've talked to companies and I've said, look, I did research, I did this paper, I've done this webinar, I talk on the conference circuit, and we talk about this, and I just got a simple question for you. Do you have any dependencies out of date? 99% say yes. And then several, when I say, do you have any that exceed 4 years in age across your enterprise? The answer is always yes. To some degree, yes. So get off that compliance hamster wheel, right? It's not a checkbox. Security is more than a checkbox. 5 years ago, it's a checkbox. It helps me on my cyber insurance. Today, it's beyond a checkbox. So we need to start managing our application security risk. So what I want to do is I want to talk about just high level, a couple of the different technologies that exist that will be helpful, that are key for success. So let me start off with software composite analysis, SCA. SCA is a technology that's going to tell you that your dependency has a finding, a vulnerability. I have Log4j version 2.7. It was running, it was working, we're great. Guess what? If you know anything, Log4j had the critical 10 that was easy to take over a company, an enterprise, to do malicious things in a very short amount of code. If you're not running an SCA tool, if you're not running anything like this, you're not going to know that you have critical vulnerabilities. The only way you might know is somebody says on Twitter or X or any of these blogs or these things that you do on LinkedIn, hey, guess what? Log4j happened. And you may say, hey, do we have Log4j in our environment? Do we have this? What versions are we running? So you're going to spend weeks and months trying to find them and remediate them. I joke about that, but the reality is that's true. Again, I know several companies that it was 7 to 8 months after the event before they knew 100% they were taken care of. And when you're dealing with SCA, you have the ability to create SBOMs. Make sure that you create these, because if you have third parties or your customers asking you, do you have something? Can you share that? Now you can. And when I ran the program, we ran into that with our vendors. Some of the tools that we used, I asked, are you running Log4j? And a few actually had the answer of yes. And so we had to do something about that. We had to mitigate it and put things in there. So SCA is about finding your dependencies or dependencies of dependencies, because some of the open source libraries actually use dependencies themselves. And so it's a hierarchy, it's a chain, it's a one-to-many, and it's a problem. Just have to know about it. SAST, all right. This is a love it or hate it type technology. Personally, I love it, but I also hate it. And the reason for that is because with SAST, the value that SAST brings is very, very high. It gives you the ability to take your source code, your open source code, open it up, take a look at it, Notepad, that source code, and be able to ask the questions. Are there any security vulnerabilities? The problem with SAST is it does not know your environment. It does not know what your purpose for your application is. It's agnostic to that. It doesn't know. And so what happens is people will say, hey, I have all these findings, but these findings don't matter. And that could be the case. For example, if you have a command injection on a command line utility, does it matter? No, you're already on the box. So context really matters. But the thing is, the SAST doesn't know that context. And so it's going to tell you, I have a find. Now, question, is there such a thing as a false positive? I know I use the term, but let me ask you guys, is there such a thing as a false positive? And I was talking with a leader of a very large enterprise, and he convinced me that the term false positive is a bad term. And the reason for that is because false positive means that the tool's not doing its job. The reality is the tool is doing its job. It's finding things. It has things that it's identified. The question is that are those findings relevant to you? That's the difference. And he convinced me that the term false positive is a bad term because it's incorrectly used, it's incorrectly thought of. So when you look at SAST, SAST is all about finding things, finding special things that match. And if it matches, it's going to tell you about them. If it matters to you, then it matters to you. If it doesn't, mark it as, not an issue for you, and move on. So, but again, SAST is great. When you're looking at development, the further left you can do for SCA and SAST, the better off you're going to be, because that helps ensure that when you get to QA and production, you're not going to have to go fix things. DAST. DAST is one of those tools that, again, it's one of those great tools because it's like running a auto regression test. I've released something or I've kicked off my scan. And what it does is it goes web-based mostly, but it's dynamic application security testing. And what it does is it goes against your website, whatever location you've given it. Do not go against your production, because when you go against your production, you're going to find yourself in your entire environment down, and that's a bad thing. And so when you're actually looking at DAST, point it against an environment that you have set up that matches production, but is not actually production. And what I mean by matches production, make sure that you have the same web application firewalls, the same firewall in front, the same F5, the same things going on that you do in production, because that's absolutely key for success. But DAST will go through and do 100+ attacks against your system. And it'll try to do parameter fuzzing and all this other stuff to help identify, is there something hidden in my web application, my APIs that are bad, SQL injections. But its findings are ones that you know exist. And the number of false positives or bad finds are minimal. Container security. I can't believe I have to mention it this way, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. When you're looking at container security, what it is you're using Kubernetes, you're using Docker. You're bringing these images down and you're scanning them and running with them. If you are running in your CI/CD pipeline a container scanner that pulls down the container, runs it, and goes straight to production, you're better off than probably 70% of those that are out there. Most people are going out, grabbing containers, putting them in, running them, and calling it a day, and pulling from the registry directly. That's all wrong. Even running your container security in your pipeline is wrong. And the right way that you want to think about it, the right way you want to do it, is you want to take, hey, guess what? A new version of the container came out. You can automate all this. So this isn't anything that you would have to manually do, but you can automate this. But when a new version of your container comes out, let's say you're using a Ubuntu version of an image, you pull down the latest image, you run through a container scanner to look for any security issues within the container. If it passes your mustard, if it passes everything you're looking for, then stick it over in a sandbox and play with it. Take your application, take your CI/CD pipeline, point to it from a QA instance, QA test, or just security test, and validate, is this container actually going to work for you? Because container changes do happen, and it will bring your production down if you don't test them. So test the new container, do a full regression test, you're good to go. But I recommend keeping your container isolated for 2 weeks. And the reason for that is because, as good as container scanner security tools are, sometimes things are found after the fact. And so you may have pulled down a container, let's say right this moment, and later on today, you've already run the scans, everything's good, you put it straight to production. Tonight, tomorrow, next week, somebody finds something. Typically, if something's malicious, you're going to know within less than 2 weeks. You're going to know typically in a day or two. And so when a container, especially a high used container, has something bad, people talk about it immediately. So by pulling a container down, testing it, validating it, putting it in the sandbox, knowing that it works, keeping it isolated for 2 weeks, and then once you know that it's good, nobody griped, nobody complained about anything being malicious about it, pull it over, put it in a location locally that you're pointing to. So you're not pointing to an external registry, you're pointing to your copy that you know is good. Rinse and repeat. Next version comes out, do the same thing. This will put you in a position so that you know that you're always pulling down good containers and you're using good containers. And for any reason, keep a history of your containers. For any reason you got to roll back for any reason, you can. And the best part about running Kubernetes is you can do the updates live without ever taking your system down. There's a lot of benefits. Let's talk about API security. This one is near and dear to me as well. There's some really good API tools out there that will go out and validate that your APIs are working. But let me just put it this way. your developers need to learn how to write good APIs. And a great way to test this, and if you haven't done this, do it. Your development teams do not understand when they're talking about JWT tokens, which is used for authentication. They are not really good about exploration of the data. And the reason why is because they struggle with, if I have a 5-minute expiration on my JWT token, you have to reissue. You have to get a new updated token. And the problem is I make the API call, it fails because the token's expired, or you could auto do things. But the reality is it's expired, it's a pain in the butt, and developers don't really understand the technologies properly, or they just don't want to do the extra work. And so what they do is they set the token to expire 24 hours later, 48 hours later, a week later. I mean, it's depending on your application, what's going on. Usually you see this way out there. And so what happens is if you go to your browser and open up history and on your applications, and you can go to something that was opened up last night, right before walking out the door, and get right back in, that's bad. Because if somebody walks away from their workstation, depending on the criticality of the application, it could be something like a medical application. But you walk away and you can go right back to that history, to a page that somebody's left, because they walked away from their computer unsecured. Guess what? Bad things happen. And so the reason why API security is important is because it ties everything together. Your mobiles, your websites, your business to business, your applications to applications. My biggest takeaway that I just want to share with anybody, if for APIs, if you don't take anything else away from today, make sure that you validate zero trust. Everything that comes in gets validated. If it does not match, if this value should never exceed 15 characters and it has more than 15 characters, you throw it away. Don't fix it, because everybody tries to fix it. Log it, throw it out, because it's been manipulated. If it's somebody trying to do an API to API, then their side's wrong, not yours, and you should throw it away. Don't try to fix it. Do not do and fall into that trap, because everybody does. And just treat all the data as important, and validate it, and then go forward. And again, if it fails for any reason, you throw it away. All right, I've been here a long time. I've got to get moving. There's so much more to talk about. All right, so let's talk about going to a proactive state, right? So look at automating your dependency updates. Teams that consistently update new versions within 48 hours of publication can reduce their vulnerabilities by 83%. A lot of compromises happen from dependencies. There are tools, Burp Suite, which is a penetration testing tool, will tell you that your dependencies are out of date. And it will actually tell you, from a tool standpoint, here's the vulnerabilities that dependency has. Would you like me to go auto attack them? AI tools today will do the same thing. And so staying up to date, an SCA tool is going to tell you your vulnerabilities and what you need to update to or upgrade to. The reality is, if you're staying up to date on your dependencies, guess what? Not a problem. And there are tools that are out there that are free that will actually create pull requests and keep it up to date. And I'll talk about that here in a few minutes. Spotlight experience, right? So know that your KPIs is the amount of time to remediate vulnerabilities and the time that it takes to fix vulnerabilities, which has reduced significantly when you look at a spotlight experience. What we're talking about is an 80% reduction in time. And what I mean by spotlight experience is being able to see your picture from all angles, knowing your environment, knowing what's going on. And when you have everything and all the information properly put together, it really, really helps you to be successful. And so automating your dependency updates. Renovate's a free tool. It's on GitHub. You're not paying for it. Go play with it. Go try it out. Because what's going to happen is, if you have an update that comes out on your version, let's say you're using a version 1.1 and version 1.2 comes out, it's going to come out and say, guess what? Version 1.2 is here. Here's a pull request. And here's merge confidence. High confidence means you can take it with minimal effort. Low confidence means that you're going to have to make some changes because there's a breaking change. And again, it's a free tool. So go take a look at it. That's where I'm going to land. But it scans your repos. It does automated pull requests. It does merge confidence scores. It gives you the ability to group everything together. And whenever you take an update, it doesn't matter what tool you're using, but when you take an update for a dependency, make sure you do a regression test on everywhere that touches. My recommendation, just do a full one on your application. If your QA team does not fully regression test every release, they have a conversation with them, because they should. And if they're doing full regression, that opens the door for you to do a lot more from a security standpoint and from a developer standpoint to make sure that you're staying current. And the other thing that's cool about Dependency Renovate is it allows you to actually pull in if you have internal versions of libraries that you guys use, not just external, but internal, it takes care of those as well. It says it's been downloaded 1.3 billion, but honestly, it's far more than 1.3. All right, so let's talk about Spotlight experience, right? So having a repo-centric approach. So instead of just having all these tools and all this stuff, look at, there's a lot of tools that are out there where you can actually plug in right to the repository that you're working out of. And what happens is when it has a find, it's right there. When it has a change or something that it wants to do, it's right there. And so what happens is your developers work within GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, all the different SCM systems. Put the information for them where they live. Don't make your developers have to log into 20 different applications like you do just to know the security profile of the application. Bring it all to them, put it in the spot where they're used to, and it really helps them. It does prioritization, and it also helps you remediate because it's all together. All that information is there. And when you do that, we have all seen across the board more than 3 times the number of vulnerabilities are fixed because developers are either aware of them, or it could be because the fact that it actually creates the pull request and the tools take care of it pretty much for you. So the developer result, right? So now developers have a better focus on new functionality and features, and that's their job. They're not stuck on security fixes. When something happens, they find it, they take care of it. When you have a security fix or change that happens in the, and it makes it to QA, what happens? Well, guess what? QA finds it. They say, hey, we have a find, you need to address it. Well, the problem is now you've wasted QA's time. You've wasted time down the road because that auto regression may take 2 days to do a full regression on. And guess what? At the end of the 2 days, hey, guess what? We have a find. You've just lost 2 days. So it's important, to do what you can further left, but it's okay if you don't catch it left. If you end up catching it right, if you're catching it when it goes to production, then at least you know about it and you can make informed decisions. Developers are not afraid to have an open conversation with the security team. So when you have a good relationship with the developers and things are humming and going nicely, what happens is you have a development team working on a mobile application for your cell phone, and they're going to ask you, hey, guess what? This application has medical information or whatnot. What's the best way to secure it? Because if I leave my phone at a patient's house by accident, what should I do? Is a thumbprint enough? And when you have your developers starting to reach out to your security team and talk to them, that's a good place to be in, because that's when you know that your security is working and things are going well. Your technical debt is lower, and as a result, you have good dependency hygiene. When you have outdated dependencies, that is not security debt, that's technical debt. And that is something that is usually not considered when you look at it. And developers don't like tech debt. Your project managers do not like tech debt. And when you take care of your dependencies, that takes care of your tech debt. Your 0-day vulnerabilities can be addressed quickly. The reason why I say this is some versions of dependencies change over time. If you've been taking those changes over time and scheduling out the ones that require actual work and slip them in, when you're basically caught up, those changes slip in easily. It's not, I have 100 or 200 things I've got to go address. It's one or two. You can slip them in, you can fix it. When you've stayed current with the dependencies, even when you have a breaking change, it's minimal. But if you're going from version 1 to version 7 and you have a lot of breaking changes, then the development team may ask, do I want to keep with the same dependency? Is it more effort to keep it or switch to something else? So it really helps you when you're doing a proactive state. And one more thing, if you do have a lot of finds, do what's called a fix campaign. Take your findings that you know that need to be addressed, divide them up by the number of developers, take 2 to 3, 4 days, and have them only focus on that between sprints. Hey, one sprint finished, we're going to focus on it because we're going to do full regression anyway, and now they can address it and do some good stuff. From the security team standpoint, right? So now you have full visibility and control. When you're in one platform, if you're doing this, dealing with the SCM system like GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, all those, now you have, just like your developers, one view. Or if you have an ASPM system and it's all coming together and feeding in, you have a good view or platform system of all your information. And now you can make better informed decisions. You can bring it all together and decide what matters to me. And that's what you really ultimately get is flexibility into what matters. Because when you have everything automated, when you're doing things in the repository, onboarding becomes a lot easier. And guess what? That coverage that was 5, 10, 15% now can quickly become much higher. A lot of applications that run in GitHub, inside the SCM systems, the beautiful thing about a lot of the applications out there is they have the ability to do global controls. So now I can say, hey, any new repository that's created falls under these policies, these guidelines, these rules. And so now all of a sudden, you have teams spinning up new things and they get pull requests. Hey, your dependency's out of date. Here it is, update. And so now it's just that coverage quickly becomes much higher. And you have, again, visibility into what matters. So you're not just having people creating stuff that you're unaware of. Now you have visibility into everything. So holistic view, one platform, a good centralized scan configuration. You can prioritize the data based on your information exploitability, your CVS 3.1, 4.0, an easy integration in the third party. Because when you're dealing with all this, now you can feed right into anything that you want, like an API or, there's just so much, hold on a second, I got to move the mouse real quick. There's so much that plays into it that it's just, it gives you a good spot where you can say, look, here's how everything integrates, here's how everything works together, and it flows nicely. Your scalability, your flexibility, right? So now you're scanning everything. Everything's coming in the door. Everything's checked. Everything, where it stands, because nobody's going to sneak stuff in past you. And so you have those scans. Whenever somebody changes anything, depending on where you implement this, it just scans. It just happens. That visibility. The global configuration is important. And then your on-prem scanning. A lot of applications, security tools out there can't, and some can. So when you're looking at your configuration, what are your company policies? Consider, do we need on-prem scanning, or is scanning in the cloud okay? So your security team result, when you have all this working together for you, developers communicate nicely with you. They're saying, hey, we have findings, we have things to address, or hey, we have new functionality, new features, or we're building something new. Can you be part of this security? Can you sit down with us at the table and make sure we're writing this in a secure method? Security teams know the risk, especially of the entire environment. And that's key for their success, for your success as a security side. Management knows what's going on. You take the findings, you take the data, you push it up to the executive level. The executives know where we stand as a company, and that is critical. Vulnerabilities are known, your time to remediate is better, and your zero vulnerabilities, guess what? It's a version away. 0 day came out, and sometimes, typically when those 0 days come out, usually by that point, a new version's already been out because somebody's already addressed it, so that when it is announced, there's already a fix. And guess what? If you're staying ahead of that and taking the fixes as they come out, those 0 days, they're not for you. They're for everybody else that's not staying on top. So updating dependencies is like going to the dentist. If you do it only every few years, it's going to hurt. And I love this one. I threw it in. It's one that I've used on multiple talks, but developers cost too much money to spend time manually updating dependencies, said no one who's ever been compromised. Again, dependencies is an easy open door to be compromised. All right, so your developer experience is everything. If it's not easy to use, it won't be used. So when I was running my application program, one of the things that I always did was whenever I was evaluating a new tool or a new something, a new process, I would always involve a couple of different development teams. And the reason why is because if they're not comfortable doing it or the tool, it's not going to happen. You cannot force developers as much as you want to do stuff that you want to do if it's not easy and friendly. If it's painful for you to use, it's going to be painful for them to use. It's important to make it as simple and easy. That's why the repository works so nicely, is when you have everything sitting in a repo, guess what? It's all there. It's in their environment. They know it. They're not having to log into all this other stuff. Developer experience is critical for success. Developers want to do what developers do. Keep them in their natural habit. They want to develop, let them develop. When they do know about the findings or the things that are out there, it's absolutely, they're going to do something about it. So they'll take care of it. Developers are focused on getting their job done. And that's really key for the company, because how do you stay in business? You sell stuff. Having that holistic view, seeing the whole picture is important, because when security looks like a puzzle, it's hard to know where to go. It's hard to know where to start. It's hard to know what to focus on without assembling it. And when you have to go pull things from 5 or 6 different places, guess what? That's time consuming. That could be critical. If I have a 0 day right now, I tell you guys, guess what? This version of this dependency that you have is problematic. Can you go out and know every touch point that dependency has? If the answer is no, put that on your list. That's a good to do. And that is a good immediate to do, because stuff happens all the time. SCA will tell you that, by the way. All information in one place, that's where real decisions are made. Guess what? We have a 0 day. It's in these 5 locations. You go fix those 5. If you don't have all this information together, you're going to spend hours and days trying to identify and then go from there. And decisions on partial information is just a partial solution. Prove me wrong. If you don't have all the facts, can you make a good decision? You'll make a good educated decision, but can you make an accurate decision? Arming your security teams is important. So in order to be successful, developers need to be successful, right? When they're being successful and they know they're doing well from a security standpoint and everything's humming along, they do so much better. Having the right tools for the job makes it easy, right? You're not going to go take a wrench and put on a new roof. You're going to have hammer and nails and tools to do it. Using the wrong tool can be done, but it's painful. So having actionable results when you have the right tools, because it tells you the right stuff that you need to focus in on. And giving developers what they need to ensure that security has a chance of success will make you successful. If you're not giving them the right stuff, feeding them the right information, again, that's why it's important to have a developer on the security team. You can filter out that information and come to them with actionable results, things that matter, and things will be so much better. What success looks like. So the developers that are using AppSec regularly, when you do it properly, goes from 15 to 90%. I'll let you just read this because I don't need to read it to you. But take a look at this. I mean, your stoppages, the things that happen, your days required, your immediate exposures are much quicker when you're successful. The number of developers doesn't change because now your developers actually focused on getting other things done, and they're not focused on just the data, day in, day out stuff. I'm almost done, by the way. I'm just kind of trying to blow through it. And the man hours, right? The track, your applications, quickly drop from 40 down to quarter of a day because you have everything going. And time spent working on actual work and not chasing dependencies, priceless. All right. I reached it. I got question and answers. I actually got to this point in a good, timely manner. This talk, typically I can easily go much longer. I was just kind of short, trying to keep it short. Are there? Go ahead.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Chris. Questions, anyone? If you have questions, you can open up the Q&A. Oh, there's already one that has popped up. Yes, open up the Q&A session and ask your questions. You can also use the chat out there. Are you able to see the questions, Chris, in the Q&A? I'm not sure.
I am not. I'm trying to find it.
Okay, I will read it to you. It's from an anonymous attendee.
Sure.
It says, nice presentation, Chris. My company got 200 plus developers, but I'm the one who is doing the application security thing.
Mm-hmm.
If my DevSecOps team is only me, and we're going to insert the pipeline into the SDLC, which part do you recommend to start? And what should be the arrangement that you suggest? So, I mean, if I had to summarize or paraphrase, one person starting into DevSecOps, they got a pipeline. Where do they start?
Right. No, that's a great question because, again, it's all about automation. There were only 3 of us running 700 developers when I ran my program. I eventually ended up with security champions, but the reality is 3 people did it all. And for you, when you're at 200, you can do it all too. Automation is going to be key and important for you. And what I mean by that is I would actually take a step back and I would seriously look at what tools are you running and can these run in the repositories? Because when you run it in the repositories, then it gives you that automation that you need to be successful and you bring light into it. A lot of these are great to hit in your SDLC. When you got it in your pipeline, but the problem with the pipeline is sometimes it's a little later than you want. So take a look at the automation for like if you're running GitHub or any of those things there, automation is going to be key. Start there. Then I would follow up with the CI/CD pipeline because then that is am I going to release this to production incorrectly? And so that's your secondary check. That CI/CD pipeline is your checkbox. Did I really get it all covered?
Thank you very much for answering that, Chris. I'm gonna, if you don't find it intrusive, add one more thing. If you're looking for, Chris presented SCA, SaaS, DAST, container security, and API security. If you're looking for which one of these to put first into the pipeline, maybe SCA because it's easy. Well, the amount of result that you might have to deal with that might be huge, but hey, start there. It's a low effort, high value thing. Might help you with the number of vulnerabilities that you might have to deal with initially. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to the next one. It's an interesting one. It's a tool specific one from Adrian. Sure. He's asking, how is Renovate better than Dependabot? Right. Renovate is better than Dependabot.
Yes. So there is a huge difference. Renovate's not a security tool. Renovate only goes out to pull updates. That's it. It's not to tell you that your version has vulnerabilities. It won't do that. It simply is an update tool. And the beautiful thing about it is it has what's called merge confidence. You don't get that in Dependabot. So it won't tell you that your version from this version to this version is going to be a simple update. With Renovate, we have over I think probably 5 or 6 billion downloads at this point. And really the whole trick is to just stay updated. If you're staying updated, you don't need Dependabot. You don't need those other tools. Those tools will tell you where all the libraries exist. That's the big benefit at that point. But if you're staying up to date with Renovate, you're already leaps ahead. And Renovate looks at, are there updates from the actual repository? Dependabot has to go off of the NVD and other resources. Renovate goes directly to the developer source. Is there an update? Yes. Here you go.
All right, amazing. Thank you for answering that. And here's another question. In the current AI world, how do you think AI can optimize our AppSec work, securing application?
Wow. I love AI. Just so you know, I actually run a lot of things locally on AI at home. I've actually got my own environment that's not web-based. I love AI. AI can do so much for you. Think about this way, right? If you have a find, if you have a new developer who has never heard of a SQL injection or cross-site script injection, you can give them, just create a page of prompts. Hey, ChatGPT, what is a SQL injection? It will give you a great example. You can say, what is SQL injection in Classic C? What is SQL injection in these? It'll give it to you in whatever language. And then you can ask it, how do I fix this? And it's going to give you a great answer on, hey, here's how to actually remediate this, to take care of this. With AI, it increases your development creativity and speed by 50+%, because now you can ask ChatGPT for advice. Stack Overflow, like, I'm an old developer. We went to Stack Overflow, got ideas and thoughts. That's how you treat AI. It's 50, number 52 again, but it's wrong 52% of the time. And they've admitted that. And the reality is with the hallucinations and other things, use it as a resource to help you, give you ideas. The information coming from it is normally not secure. You can ask it, create an API endpoint that does JWT tokens and things, and then turn around, pass that same code in and say, is this secure? And it will say, no. Here's the suggestions to make it secure. Why didn't it give it to you secure in the first place?
All right, amazing. Another one. Will you consider to integrate the LLM technology to automation? That should be a big topic in a whole area this year. How can an organization leverage LLM, large language models, and DevSecOps/AppSec? I think it's a follow-up question. So the crux of the question is, how can an organization leverage LLM in DevSecOps?
All right, so I know where this is headed. So my question becomes to you: are you happy sending your 8-year-old son or daughter in a car that drives itself to an endpoint without you being in the car, somebody being at the steering wheel? My answer is this: I love AI. We got to keep our head out of the sand. So many people put their heads in the sand on this one. The reality is AI is an amazing thing. The direction, the things that AI can do are absolutely outstanding. And it's definitely a direction you should be playing with. If you're not playing with AI, put it on your agenda, play with it. But here's the thing: AI can be wrong. And if you have it in the process and you have it auto remediating or auto fixing things, then you're going to find yourself in problems from time to time. And I say that because I had a process where we had a find in an API. The API said, hey, we have cross-site scripting as an issue. We tried to manually remediate this. This was before AI, LLMs. And we spent 3 days trying to just get it off the list. And the problem is if you encode it like the answer is, then you break everything downstream that's utilized in the APIs or the front end. If you're encoding on the front end, that's the right answer. The problem is if you have auto remediation on there and it tries to fix it on the back end, you're going to break everything up that's downstream from you. And that's a problem. And so all the stuff with AI, you really need to have a human in the process today. It's getting better. This is a different topic probably in 5 years, but today you really want a human in there. Just to at least validate, make sure that the answer is right. And again, the LLMs, it depends on, there's so many out there, but think about it this way. It's pulling from things that may be tainted or poisoned, and that's what you're going to get. And so you just need to make sure that, is this secure? Is it doing everything you want? Again, I could talk about this for hours.
Now, I really like the example that you gave about how AI can fix something for you, but then it would end up breaking all the downstream consumers of an API. Very relevant example. Really puts humans in the loop, actually not in the loop, at the center of everything that we do at AppSec at
Right,
the
right.
moment. Okay, right. I don't see any questions from the audience. If you do, well, keep sharing them either on the Q&A or on the chat section. I do have a few notes. So for me, personal experience, updating is a scary thing. And I think Chris also pointed it out in the slides. If something works for 4 years, well, I mean, a lot of context would have changed after 4 years. We as humans might have learned new programming languages. We might have updated our technology stack as well. But why bother touching that? We won't even remember the piece of code that we wrote. So it's a very scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
Dependencies, updating them might break things as well. So with the technology aid that we have, things that can automatically update our dependencies, we would still want somebody to be improving our automated test suite or running regressions after those updates. A short comment, and a 0 day in this particular library. So Chris had this question about, if I tell you that I have a 0 day in this particular library, do you have the intelligence right now to go ahead and figure out in all of your projects, what are the affected areas? What are the affected projects in your entire portfolio? SEA can help you with that. Perhaps you, the other thing that has already picked up now in the past years is the software bill of materials, giving you a huge list of information about where things are, where they're coming from, and giving you that particular intelligence. And I have this question. First, you mentioned integrating a developer on the security team, right?
Mm-hmm.
The past decade is about integrating security on the development teams, and we gave that person a name. They call it security champion. So if you
Right.
had a developer on the security team, what would we call them?
Amazing security guys.
All right.
For me, when I took it over, I wrote my own webhook receiver for all of our source code systems. And I wrote and did automation. I could onboard any new acquisition in less than 4 hours within a 95 to 98% coverage. It could take days to hit all the scans, but when you have a developer on the security team, they think that way. They think, how can I automate this? How can I make it better? What can I do to make the world better for our company? And that's, that. And then we have a find. And guess what? It's not important to the developer, so I'm not going to share it. Or I have a find that is critical and important, and they can effectively communicate back to the development team what it is that was found and why it's important, instead of just throwing something over the fence and saying, hey, this is critical, it's a 10. Good luck. you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have another question in the meantime. It's a big one, and I think we also have to look at it from an empathy perspective. Look at it as empathetically. The question is, as a security expert, the demands today are vast. When I read the word vast, and I begin to think, is that another SAST, DAST, IAST, BAST? Okay, jokes apart, from tooling and programming to working across various technology stacks, there's a lot to master. With so much foundational knowledge to cover, it can feel overwhelming. What are the best strategies to stay ahead? What tips do you have, Chris? The best strategies to stay ahead when the technology stack that we have to cover as security are
Right,
vast.
right. So That is a great question, because if you're not a developer, you're kind of in the back seat. And if you are a developer on the security team, you're going to find that you don't need to be in the weeds like a developer. You need to understand a high level. When you've been coding for a long time, it all becomes, does this end in a semicolon or not? Or what is the structure of the language? And that's it. Because really the foundational aspects of anything is the same. When you look at it from a development standpoint, their life is crazy because things are always coming out, new frameworks, new things. You've got frameworks that sit on frameworks that sit on frameworks, and that is fun because when something's not working, you're like, well, that's actually a foundational issue with JavaScript, not your framework, but the actual foundation can't do that. And so that's why it doesn't work. And when the technologies are moving at the speed of sound, with the security tools, there's always something new, always something better, always something fresher. AI took the world by surprise. February of the previous year, even this year, we weren't really talking AI like we do today. And so, you just really stay on top of it. And let me share how I do it real quick. I have a couple of websites that I go to that I frequent, that I follow. I post 3 times a week on LinkedIn. If you want to actually know AppSec really deeply, follow me, watch the stuff I post, because it's all about AppSec. I have a podcast, I have blogs, I have newsletters I put out that are there. But there's a lot of things that are going on that you'll see in LinkedIn. That about the passwords and the social security numbers and all the things, people talk about them. It's a great spot. Used to be Twitter. That's kind of gone by the wayside. You don't go to Reddit for this kind of information. You get people yelling at each other, and you get all these angry, grumpy old people making stuff up. But but find a couple of people on LinkedIn that you really like and follow them. Read what they have, because there's a lot of great guys putting a lot of great content out, and it's all for your benefit. And so that is probably a good spot where I would start.
Amazing. Thank you very much. I'm going to wrap up. We overshot by a little bit, but it's all right. One of the things that struck me in this presentation is the word developers, which sort of took me back to those years when Steve Ballmer headed Microsoft, went on stage and screamed, developers, developers, developers. Really, really like that aspect of this presentation today. Thank you very much, Chris. Before I wrap up, a few reminders. Number one, the presentation is being recorded. It will be up on our YouTube channel, Practical DevSecOps YouTube channel. We will also post it on LinkedIn, tag you, Chris, and
Thank you.
with respect to people to follow, also look at Practical DevSecOps. We have different pages, I don't know what it's called, LinkedIn, different topics or areas that we post about. Every day, a dedicated team working on application security things. You might find that interesting as well. We also have a couple of new courses coming out. AI hallucinations, you mentioned, Chris, so we have a course on AI security in one of our supply chain security courses. Also talk about that. Check them out if you're interested with that. Chris, I'm going to connect with you right after this webinar and hopefully explore some other topics. R2D2, how did I notice that before?
Yeah.
All right. Great. Everybody who's stuck around till the very end, thank you very much. And I hope to see you in another session of DevSecOps Live. All right. Take care. See you later. Thank you very
Thank you,
much, Chris.
guys.